Kwaniriza ku Baba TV kagwe ku TV obashibazinga na ku Ramande kwaisu sa mawule gaife makonde kwisa tuniza sama mwesigwa nene program the platform every single Monday tubao twasobola okubatenga tukulaga ensinga bwe eri kutambula mu nsongedde obukulembeze mu nsongedde eby'enfuna mu nsonga ebigema ku muntu wa bulido n'ebyo na byona ebigema ku nsonga ey'amawanga agatulireine. Of course sound tukasobola kubatenga tuogera nga ife Uganda, tukasobola kuogera ngo muna Kampala wenka, tukasobola kuogera ngo muna Kibuga Idinda, nti obanzi ndi Masaka yonka. Shoyi notegera nti n'abantu abakwetolweire oyinza okubanga musaawa ndala yonketi omuntu akwetolweire ava Dubai songa tulina okubatenga tutegeera biki ebitulireine, biki ebituli emabega, biki ebituli kwakabango okuva wetuli. Nenda kwebaza mukagwa yosinzira okuba atengo tubona na kweisusayo mubikuduko ebya Idi au Fitri mwebala okuba atenga mudagwiza abaisira mona kolwa lero bamaze ku ekisibo kyaibwe kyena kwa 30 kyaweireku so na kolwa mwadaguza Idi nenda bazayoza munange mwebala okuba atenga mutuse kuluna kuluno olwalero niwe yolingo bula mutibutambira bulungazi as you did expect. Otawamu mani no kobantu that is the end. Life does not end when there is partying and when there is joy. Obula musigalanga butambula. So nenda kusaba ekintu kirala yongera okubanga oteekateeka obulamu even beyond what you are seeing today osobola okuba nti kyolubirira mu mwaka guno osobola okukifuna. Program the platform nona kolwa lero once again. Nina omunamateeka Professor Christopher Isaac Lubogo ensonga edamateeka aditafuta mu ngeri yalowooza nti Uganda twandibeere tutyo otambula. This is the second time twali kukunaye nga tulingirira ekindi ku mulimo gye ighanga akola n'ebyo byasuubira nti gavumenti y'eggwanga erya Uganda amawanga agali ku lukalu lwa East Africa n'amawanga agali ku lukalu lwa Africa galina okuba ate nga gagula gakyuse mu nsonga ey'amateeka. Bangi kwimwe kwolwo wetwali wano mwamalirizanga ebibuuzo bingi ino n'okuyaayana tusobola okuba ate nga tusigala nga twogera ku nsonga edda amawango mu ighanga erya Uganda kwali kunene ino. So nakolwa leero once again tudakubanga tuba n'okuwaya ku nsonga y'amateeka engeri yegatambula mu ighanga lino erya Uganda ng'ensonga enkulu tugiringirira Uganda efugira ku mateeka oba Uganda efugisa mateeka. Ensonga eyo webanga kwebyo kuliko ekituufu ensonga eyo etugasa oba neyongera okuba ate nga etikosa. Kwaniriza ku Baba TV
nsangaire okubona mukama wange era muganda wange mukulu mwesigwa neyanziza okumpa omukisa guno kuba nti ndogera kunaba Oluganda n'abaanaze ne baganda bange ne baanoko era nebaza Katonda atuweeresa kino n'okutuusa kuno ku olwa Idi Fitri era nsangaza abasiraamu okusingira ddala the Mohammedan faith aba eri babe mu kisibo okumala enaku ediwerako 30 twegaita wala nabo n'okuddaguza nabo kubanga ife tulowooza nti tulina Katonda mulala in spite of those different divisions in terms of the religions that we follow.
Chijeni kuchinishiwango antitona wachiwandika the God of Africa.
Absolutely.
Before over after the coming of the God of the world. Twaina bakatonda bamikawo.
Ideology je proponing mu kitabu ekyo jebeta intelligent design, the African and the ontological athletics, African athletics. Ideology je proponing ekoba nti I believe in convergence of religion rather than divergence of religion.
Okwegaita okwamadini dani okweyawulamu.
Absolutely. Era bweyagana for example the Mohammedan faith, even the Christian faith, all of them are actually Abrahamic faith in a way. One descendant wa yani Abraham. So there's a lot of unity in them, but the ideal thing about this is that Eliyo Musadam went to Aslam wrote a book called Jesus of Nazareth the Zealot. He has a PhD. He actually has a degree in the New Testament, the master's in the New Testament, and a PhD in the New Testament. And yet he's a Muslim. So and he said, I don't want. In fact, he was on CNN of Maribanga. interviewing about the ideology of Christ and stuff like that. Yakat, by the way, it's not that I don't believe in Christianity as such. I choose Islam because Islam gives me a better metaphor in terms of following. So he argued that all these religions eventually become metaphors. Ngira, but fundamentally will all, end at the same prime, which is God Almighty.
Well, we're trying to get some manga they call theories and ideologies. That a theory according to, there are some of the things somebody could say. It is a theory and it's an understanding and the revelation. Wenenda utandikiro na kolwalero. There is a lot setwalingira ku the other time we twali wano ngoli tukobera amateeka n'obuntu bulamu n'ebindi. Waliwo ensonga editulondesa abakulembeze era twakoba nti it is the center of legislation which is the parliament, and era tukoba nti if the parliament says yes we have hope, which is the legislation okubaga amateeka. You remember inumawo nti parliament lwali erikyusa isema wangu abana Uganda n'abaali tebabitegeeranga eno parliament byekola bavayo bakuba nti lwaki mukyusa. On many occasions nti abakulembeze buli wetubanga tulina ekintu kitukola nti Uganda tufugira ku nfuga ey'amateeka. Nenda mutwawulirewo. Uganda tufugira ku nfuga ey'amateeka, Uganda tufugisa mateeka.
Ekibuuzo kituufu era kirungi ino kyoli kubuuza. One of the things kyendowooza nti eggwanga lyaffe kyeri kufeesingamu nnaku lino nekyo kyobuuziza kyebeta rule of law, n'ekyokuba nti eriyo kyebeta the doctrine of separation of powers, nti mulimu ebiti bisatu. Professor Kanyehamba akoba ati it's like a cooking stove with 3 stones. Each one of them has a purpose. Era nti byonna bikola ki bifumba byayamba emere okola ki okuya. The problem today, as we agree nga bwokobye, nti it appears one stone eboneka oti etendinga oku-influencing stones edindi. In fact, in one of the books which is called Demystifying the Fountain of Honor, Presidential Executive Mandate, I make allusion to that fact nti sometimes tuyagana nga ACG becomes more executive minded than the executive itself. In fact, legislature in most times ojoko yagana nga rubber stamping the executive that is saying. So ideology is really propounding nti do we really have the rule of law? Do we really have the separation of power? I'll give an example. In one of those books, my arguments, your doctrine jebeta posse comitatus.
Posse comitatus.
Posse comitatus.
Meaning what?
It's an act that, especially in those modern countries, rarely do you see abasirikale bano abe uniform, back police, but the army on the streets enforcing what they call civilian responsibilities.
Nti tibatera kubonebwa.
Absolutely. Okutolako nga waliwo declaration nti oba olutalo oba waliwo ekintu ekigema ku Uganda mu ngeri y'amaanyi. Ekyamaanyi eno. Aye enaku dino, I mean, you just walk around the corner and go on abantu ba military police everywhere. So the argument is whether or not we're really following constitutionalism ni rule of law.
So katuneno nga tukalivaawo.
Yes.
Nebuzaako ekintu ekyo cause eiranga wetubona wa police to believing anti kukyalo kuliku obuzibu. Let be in a community, let be in mu kibuga. Ate nga wetubona ab'amagi tukuba nti obuzibu bweddiira irala. It is now no longer news. Kwagana nti osanze aba red top military ogisanze. And we are taking them as now common people with us.
Absolutely, and I agree with you.
What does that show?
Eriyo principle jenjo okukoba yawandikibwa one guy from the Roman times. Ekoba upelicitan ipit fisit appellate, meaning they make desolate and call it peace. These guys banabasada baja balumba a certain area. Balwana kamanda webe akati mwoche buli kintu kyona muzikirize buli kintu kyona tubene emirembe. So they went by conquering area by Georgia and they went back jubilating. nti tukoze ki tulese emirembe ne
tuwangwire
era emirembe gize mu koki mu territory
because ayo bajja kulwana bafiire
absolutely ensi yona nekoze eti eweerewo so yairayo but one of his fellow Romans yakati they make desolate and call it what peace. So the argument is sometimes in our jurisdictions tujja twalowooza nti emirembe kitegeeza nti ifuga lya amaanyi olwokuba tulibona nti omusirikale buli koona gye tukola ki gye tubitamu Samuel bw'ayogera ku ekigambo nga bamunoonya bamugema obwire bamukati munayidda bino titubitegeera dda weekania ne mu information eno gye wayogeire emirembe oti neegyo ndowooza nti gyandibairewo singa tuba tufollowinga kye beeta constitutionalism nga bwe yandibairewo.
So the silence of voices that are going to make alarms, and if they are silent, that is not peace.
In my observation and argument, that will not be peace. Olw'ensonga, actually peace would be where there would be freedom of expression. Nti omuntu waidemba okwogera n'okudisagreeinga niiwe somewhere without actually even fearing for his or her life. Nti nsobola okwogera ekigambo olwaleero kyaba nga kisobola kundetesa ido ku CID headquarters nti mwida otunambe kwononole ki ebigambo ebigemagana ni bino. Sebiseera ebisinga eddembe ly'abantu tiritambwire bulungi. You are a journalist. You have so many of your brothers and sisters oidi ekibaire mu media. One of the books I've written, by the way, is Media Law and Journalism in Uganda, and I make some of those provisions and allusions in that respect. Now propounding an ideology nti people should be given their freedom of expression in terms of what they are supposed to say. Sometimes byetwogera tibigenderera nti binakuba birungi. I'll give an example. Wali omwami, some of you guys who in America, but yaja ya appointing one of the guys who was his best critic wenga nasinga omwogera kuki ebibi yamukati muna idanku obukulembeze ku mo journalism office eno nambeko oli amukati byona byo representing iwe president nze kikirizagana ki nabyo akati that's the reason why I actually do what want you, because you'll be a better check for me, you'll be real to me
when you are near me,
you'll be real to me. I'll give you another example. Enerius was a Roman general one time. Yali atambula ku streets the Roman one time. So when he was walking there, nga buli watambula abantu bamukubira haleluya osaanidde niwo waka okitalo niwo leeta emirembe. Maama we yategera nti ono omwana amala gajakola ki gajamuniina. And you know, if the beginning of a fall is what is pride. Maama yakati muna, I'm going to hire a special servant for you. Nti buli onajjanga mu katale ng'abantu bakutambulirangako nga yali inumawo abantu banaidanga ni bakati wowe niwo osaanire nga akukuba akaama. You are only human. The idea behind is humility. Abakulembeze baife ab'ennaku dino titwidde ku distinguisha between what they call a demagogue and those who are truly inspired. Ebiseera ebisinga to following ideals, aspirations, hearsays, okwenda okupropounding ideologies edi selfish intentioned. Ate ng'ekigendera ky'abantu kiri vox populi vox dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. Olikiwulira. And the welfare of the people should always be what? Supreme. So kyoli kwogera ku kituufu. How I wish ensi yaffe edda ku mirembe egifaanana n'egyo, where people are allowed to say what they say as long as it doesn't hurt someone. Is, you know, it's not mixed with what I call malafide, vexatious, frivolous mulo.
You bring out an aspect in what other people count as peace. It is the silence of the negative voices. Can we leave the negative voices loud and we call them criticism, yet the negative voices are going to become bitter pills in the development?
Amazima gali nti every time you have a critique, it should be an advantage to you. It's a self-check. It's more like a check and balance. But wobanga twekiriza abantu ku critique, you will never learn. Even the books I write, I have 1,001 critics. Era abayinza okukubira amasimba kato yomusadda mu bino. But I enjoy them. I enjoy what they call constructive criticism. Kubanga omuntu waida nakukoba, I learn from them. I do not take it in bad faith. Nonda mu ekirungi naja n'ekyo. And be careful, because those people who critique you, it's only a beautiful mango, a ripe mango that is stoned. Ebiseera ebisinga ayo omuyembe omuvundu ebiseera ebisinga tebakola ki tibagukuba mala. So don't be afraid when people critique you, my brother Samuel. Enjoy. Just take the beautiful things out of them, learn from them, propagate and move on. That's all you need in life. You should never give up.
In a country nga tulikoba nti tulikwenda okuba ku nfuga ey'amateeka. Wetubanga tulina system efaanana etyo nti the criticism are silenced. Tuba tuviire ku nfuga ey'amateeka oba tuba tulifugisa amateeka?
Good question. Tulifugisa amateeka okupropoundinga kyetwenda. In so doing, we're actually subjugating feelings, aspirations, intuitions eda abantu. Dr. King Yakob, sometimes there's a time when we will not remember the noise of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So in fact, Eddie know go better Edmund Burke Yakob, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So, my brother,
nti omulabe kankayiremu abantu omulabe okuwangula nga abantu abalungi basirike.
So you olowooza oti anze munanda asirika. I keep telling people nti you have to learn empty, to live, to die empty. Ochidi nti the wealthiest place on earth. Do you know what is the wealthiest place on earth, my brother Samuel? Ekifo ekisingayo obugaiga ochidi munsi.
Don't tell me it is the grave.
Webale ino nabitanga niwe ng'omusoga bwakoba
kampumule mu katono program the platform. It is a lot of science behind the talk, but if you follow us you understand the irony and the secrets and the myth covered under this talk of today. Nze sama omwesigo enabanga twize tulikulingirira. There is a lot of events that we okuba atenga tukuwa. Nina ensonga lwaki tutandikireeyo nti Uganda tufugira ku mateeka oba Uganda tufugisa amateeka, then tulingirire entambula y'ebintu ebindi ku nkomerero eddamaliriza nga tutegeere ki ekyandibeire ekituufu otavaawo tulikwira. Kale nkwesusa omukumulo kale ku Baba TV neno TV obashabazinga nize Sam omwesigwa yona nayo batenga otufunira tusobola ojja kumikutu gyaife emiyunga abantu all social platforms wasobola okubatenga tufuna tusuminga live Twitter tam Baba TV Uganda jack app yaife jja mu Google Play Store tutolemu Baba Media app dasobola okubatenga obona Baba FM kote ni Baba TV onumirwe enteekateeka ed'omulembe inaku d'omwezi nga 3 mwezi gw'okutaano luba lunaku lw'abasakamakobo the World Press Freedom Day n'olunaku olw'eddo olijja okubatenga lukya era ensonga ed'eidembe n'emirembe n'amateeka tebasobola kubatenga obyawula. Bw'obanga olingirira eggwanga lino erya Uganda, many people have found themselves victims of crime ng'ate abandi amateeka tebagaidi n'abandi abaidi ku ekitono wasobola okubatenga olinaku ekitono kyoidi aye ng'abalina bala abantu abakozesa amateeka agakusingaku weewuune wakobewo nti omuntu ono akolesa amateeka oba akolesa orders. Mu studios muno namwe omukugu mu nsonga ed'amateeka yagasoma yagakenkuka era agasomesa, and many people are just proud of him. Me too, I became proud of him. Naye ndasobola okubatenga we learn from the living encyclopedia nti at a time when he goes off tundibanga tulina kyetwezeemu. Ekibuuzo kiri nti Uganda tufugira ku nfuga y'amateeka. Even said bawo donadona statements ba minister debakola, police ebikolwa byekola, amagye ebikolwa byebakola, government decisions dekola, abalamuzi kwe basinzira osala emisango, ensi kwe tutambulira okyusa isemateeka twakyusa kuno mwaka guno twakyusa omwaka ogwida tutambulira ku nfuga y'amateeka oba tufugisa amateeka. Kwebyo kiriwo ekisaana era Uganda kyerina okubatenga eba nakyo. Professor, wetukomye ng'oli kunkoba nti ola asobola okwikaikanya amaloboozi ag'abantu aboogera yakoba nti waliwo emirembe. Wobanga olingire the trend of events in Uganda, you can please paint for us a true picture. Tukali ku rule of law or tuli by rule by law?
A beautiful question, as I always said. Waliwo ekitabo ekindi kyendidde okurefaringa ku kyena wandiika bakyeta demystifying the order from above.
Order from above.
And it's the people versus the Attorney General. That's the title of the book.
Yeah.
Mubyo I actually explain some of the questions byoba okubuuza, whether or not tulina rule of law oba whether or not sometimes haven't we yielded too much, surrendered too much ku bantu bano ba enforcers ab'amateeka. I'll give an example. For example, I talked about the posse comitatus rule, which does not apply here at all, which is actually abused and thrown into the windows. But there's also the Miranda Rule, which most, even ordinary lawyers, by the way, sometimes I get disappointed at the level of ignorance of some of my colleagues in terms of those phrases and in terms of the jurisprudence, amateka, in terms of the Miranda Rule, for example. What does the Miranda Rule simply signify? Nti omusirikale waida gy'oli, he has to explain to you exactly why he's going to incarcerate you, arrest you, read you rights in terms of you have a right to an attorney, you have a right to, to call your next of kin, you have a right to behave in a certain way within that, particular incarceration. I mean, then there are the ideologies like, for example, waida niwaka tola mu engaitodo, tola mu kotido, tola mu gundi, all those things. Where does the police get that mandate? I know.
Isn't it written?
It's not written anywhere. It's only, perhaps they do it as preventative, in a sense, into protecting you in terms of keeping you in a certain place. Even the incarceration that goes beyond the 48-hour rule in terms of keeping you, several times those over in a way we have actually invoked what they call the habeas corpus, rule. In terms of that. So the argument I'm trying to propound is that we need to educating abantu baife ebintu ebigemagana nachi namateka in some of those modern countries omuntu waida joli every now and then adaka talk to my what, talk to my lawyer, don't even bother me, talk to my what, talk to my lawyer. Niwe kozo omusango okutula ku ngomusango ogwo guli felony, chebeta felony chiri over and above or capital offenses for that purpose. Maybe that's when a police can actually intrude on your so-called privacy to execute or to, or qualifying gache bali kwenda okola.
But in Uganda one, we've had many cases, basically the forces, and when it comes to forces, that is government, because they are state operatives. To comment the government in edimateka oba ekola outside law kubanga idinti abantu bejo okuida okudiringa nabo bona tibaidimateka.
Good point. And I think the argument in every singer is that abantu abasinga baplayinga ku ignorance yachi y'abantu. Although mulo iliyo chebeta ignorance juris non excusat. Ignorance of the law is no what? No excuse. So every singer, because they know these innocent people do not know much about their law, do not know about their rights. They are not actually educated in moving to rights day. So they also take, right over them. Chigezako okuva nti ebiseera ebisinga tulina okugezaako okuba naye kyolikola nze ndowooza nkirungi ino oligezaako okweducatinga abooluganda abantu okuba inonera ebigemagana n'amateeka gaibwe abantu ebigemagana ne rights daibwe because when you know your rights then you actually Winston Churchill was quoting Alexander yakati the people of China had stayed long into colonial rule over the British until they learned to say the word no.
They didn't have the word no.
They didn't have the word no. So every singer until you learn. Look at people like Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks in America, but the Americans during civil rights movements. But every time you went in a bus, ngaiwa mwirugavu ino kustuka, omuzungu yakola chi? Yatyama. Rosa Parks was the only first black American, a woman by the way, who refused to leave her seat. She refused to leave her seat for the white. And that caused a whole revolution. And revolution in America, by the way, is credited to Rosa Parks and of course Dr. Martin Luther King and people like Malcolm X. So to inoku together, if you don't learn to assert your right, freedom is not given on a silver platter.
There is a sense of fear that is created whenever forces are inserted on the mwananchi. And even when the person feels like he understands something and can't explain, the force used covers that sense of excuse, expression, and what. Do you think that is done deliberately in Uganda here? Oba abakikola bona babatibaidi mateka and they use that escape of vocal force. Interestingly,
many of them may actually know the law, but they are aware that you don't know the law. So they prey on that. Jeff Kennedy Yakoba, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. at the time when they were actually fighting. So until you demystify yourself from that argument of fear, even these books, people ask me, one time someone came and asked me, haven't they called you? Haven't they called you over some of those writings? I said, what wrong have I done? I'm only propounding philosophical and legal arguments. The only thing they have to do, those who are offended, the only thing they do, they should repent. As far as I'm concerned, I'll speak what I know is truth. So that is freedom. Freedom, by the way, doesn't come on a silver platter and go in COVID. Sometimes it comes with the tears of blood. Sometimes it comes with pain. Sometimes it comes with a lot of persistence. Out of persistence, out of your rights, that's when you... I mean, listen, I'll give an example of what happened in the civil rights activity in America. The Martin Luther King's Yakobanga Abantu. By the way, we are so lucky that we're born in a generation where we seem to be behind. I have a quoting a cat, he that starts behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. So the challenge we have is that we have to, first of all, remove that fear, that philosophical or that fear.
Until we can't make it.
Absolutely. And tell our people that, by the way, we can do it. Barack Obama wrote his book, you remember, you know, a number of books, Dreams of My Father, and then, and I think one of his remember that running motto, Jeo Kobati, you know, we can do it, you know.
Yes,
that,
we can.
Yes, we can. So that argument, so until you take that liberty of believing in yourself, the argument of faith, in fact, the Holy Scripture says, without faith, it is impossible to do what? To please God. And what is faith? Faith is calling those things that are not as if they are.
It means that you get away that fear that you have. Mukugu oli ku Baba TV, neno TV obakyabazinga unakolwa otwenze okuba atenga tulinga ku nsonga ey'amateeka. There are some things you may think nti binene ino era tiniwo byetaaga byabale, but it one day ojja okweyatanga nga you a victim of crime memala otegeere nti weetaaga obuyambi. Professor, tulina obuzibu nti all our hopes in Uganda for social development, for health improvement, for economic improvement and life stability is held in the hands of politicians. Abana byabufuzi n'abalina obulamu bwaife. Abana byabufuzi batyama babaga amateeka. Era twaba so rigged ino to implementing amateeka ago. Nti amateeka getubaga mu ighanga erya Uganda. If you were to look at the times the Ugandan constitution has been ngegonweirwamu buli ssaawa ngegonolwamu obonawo obwetaavu.
Absolutely. Elani pointed again, Kobiente, the problem we have today is we must make a distinction, my brother Samuel, between what they call a demagogue and a truly inspired. Demagogue nabo abantu abenda self-appraisal to self-aggrandise themselves. Okweriisa, okwegwanulwamu, bafunirawa. So many people go into politics because they want that self-aggrandization. Benda kwefaako bonka. But not very many people go into because they know this is a public duty. I owe you. Nina ibanda, nina okolera iwe, nina okuyamba igwanga leffe. I think again it was Jeff Kennedy Yakoba. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Absolutely.
So these are questions that we ask ourselves when we go into these so-called public offices. Tujaamu olw'okubanga twenda kuvuga mama tukamalungi, tujaamu olw'okuba twenda kubaala bulungi, tujaamu olw'okuba twenda kwegayigawaza. I was amazed. I think it was Professor Kanyamba Yatko, but one time there was a struggle in the High Court. I will not mention the individuals. The Supreme Court between some two individuals. Ngabali fighting it over cars. Ani goba Pradev e Singapore ya mwine. Senior judicial officers, think about that. Yakati omuzungu Chief Justice of a certain country, one of those European countries, yakati I'm even surprised that mulina kulwanira motoka kyesinga ki. Nze mvuga kagaali okuva ewange okujja ku Supreme Court. Yet I'm Chief Justice of that particular country. So we sometimes we have to. I plan we wakubona ngoli kuvuga kagaali. They say oyo ndoza ali kwechicha. They think ndozo obwavu onabona bwagemaiwe. You know, so we want to escalate ourselves. Twaenda okuvuga the greatest cars. Twaenda to live in some kind of amorphous or cloud nine, so that the world can look at us as untouchables. Dr. King said, I don't want to be remembered by so many accolades oba biti wabyemundiyeko, but I want to be remembered as a drum major of justice. Ebiseera ebisinga kyetwenda okwidukirako iwe Samuel. What can we remember Samuel? How did Samuel contribute? When Samuel comes to Baba TV, ayogera bintu byefaako ye kubanga ayenda kwesimbawo nga MP do oba aligezaako kuyamba abantu ba bulido kubafanishingira information. It's the same thing what I come from. Nze bwe mpandiika ebitabo. Those of you who have been very critical, every book I've written, 20 now running, has nothing to do with books ebintu ebiri existent already. No, absolutely nothing. Bintu biyaka, this is groundbreaking books because I look for those novel areas. Edisobola okuyamba tomorrow. And I'm projecting in terms of the future. Kubanga ndikwenda ido. That's why sometimes people may not understand the things that we write. They think, you're not in the right mind. But not being in the right mind is a normal thing. In fact, let me give you an example. Hitler, Yakoba Abantu, that you can actually make people believe that hell is heaven and heaven is hell. You know, and you told them the bigger the lie, the more people will actually do what? Believe it.
We believe in
Hitler told the people and told them, you know what, Germans, people hate you because you actually have what they call blue eyes. You have seen Abazunga wearing blue eyes. You know they have blue eyes. Do you know what eyes Hitler had? He didn't actually have blue eyes. He had black, the ones that the normal black people and white thing around us, around his eyes. But he made people believe that people were against them because of their blue eyes. So ideology zidi nzokwida dachusa ni kire kyobuziza oti abantu banabakola nibafuga nibatutamwe ebintu bino, and then they do things without any feel of heart at all. Bategera bibakola oba tibategera bibakola. I can assure you they clearly know what they are doing. Actually,
then why do they do them?
They do them because they know it's the only thing that can serve their purpose. Every one of them.
It is the only tool they can use.
Absolutely. Every one of them does it because Achi didn't chimuyamba. In fact, listen to this. I think it was the late Basoga and Sadu Yakoba. Yakati, every time, I know it was, I think when I was in Busoga College Mwiri, one of my lecturers, I forget his name, Tangaba public speakers. So one time he used to invite people like the late Basoga and Sadu and many others to come and talk to us. And every time they used to come, they were talking about NRM, the good things, the bad things about NRM, the bad things about NRM. Then there was a time where every time they invite him, until the guy told us, by the way, by the way, every time I invite this guy, he's very busy. I think now he has reached the high table. Meaning, the wotuka high table. If you gambo bikolachi, you have examples. I don't want to quote examples. Above Manga, His Excellency, when they reach the high table, you might kolachi. So it is very clear. Some people actually make the noise. Kubanga benda kutukawa ko high table. They don't make alarms of change. They just make a noise to be seen. Absolutely. These are what they call they masquerade in terms of being blue-eyed boys or what they call blue-eyed people. But the intention in their heart is actually to make sure that they are propagated in certain position where they can make their stomachs comfortable.
The demystifying the order from above. Ekigambo order from above liryo tilyafuuka lyonna iteeka mu Uganda nti abantu bewansi tutuuka okutya the office and the palace where order from above lives. Is that a sign of dictatorship? Is that a sign of backwardness?
That's a very good question. In fact, that's the argument I also make in my book of Executive Mandate, where I say demystifying the fountain of honor himself in his presidential capacity. Can you sue the president, for example? Can you impeach the president?
As who?
As an individual, even as a nation. It has happened in America. I can mention about 3 presidents who have been impeached. Not so. Bill Clinton was impeached. Remember, at least attempted to be impeached. Trump attempted to be impeached. Meaning, even for things that are really not so colossal, if I may use that word. But how many times have we seen Africans where we have those issues of impeachment of president? Even the so-called ICC, yet we are creating ICC, and for where we take the black people. Mention how many people do you know? How many white people do you know have been taken to ICC? Black people. The majority of them about black people.
I strongly one day supported one of the presidents on African continent who said ICC is like a staff room for African presidents to be penalized. And
incredibly, Kaini Febe na baba reporting ayo because we want to to either to avenge on them But ICC, incredibly, has got about 7 people, African leaders actually, trying Mukoti Daiwe for acts and omissions that, they consider to be ultra-vires, if I may use that word. But the point I'm trying to underscore is that I think Ubuntu service, public duty should be a service to society. You are indebted to the society. It's not to self-aggrandise yourself. Not very many people may have that zeal, I can assure you, because many of us are actually looking at how we get a better car, how we get another wife after we get rich, how we get a better shoe. We're not interested in terms of how we help our brothers and sisters. I mean, I was in South Africa some time ago, about almost 30 years ago. Incredibly, I was working with some guy today, Yankati. Do you know these Yaka things have just started here about 2 or 3 years ago? But in South Africa, I was in Botswana. That thing had already been there. This argument of paying using Yaka, And I asked ourselves, where have we been? Now we see the roads that we're building right now, the so-called northern bypasses and stuff like that. Do you know the northern bypass is actually the most expensive road in the world? Are you aware? You can find it out.
This one in Uganda?
Yes, the most expensive in the whole world. Think about it. Incredibly paid by poor peasants like you and I, which poor peasants, by the way, are not even allowed to ride motorcycles and even walk on that road. It's only people who are supposed to have cars who do that the Entebbe Express Highway. Think about that. Then you ask yourself, what did we do as Africans? Aren't we supposed to be given, rewarded? Are we living in another generation?
Who masterminds all those? I don't know how I can package it smoothly. But who masterminds all that ill? That abantu batuuka babanga as if balitwalibwa nga abazira kye baidi, aye nga abantu bakozesa amateeka. In other words, okwibiramu. Abana mateeka mwekweka mu mateeka kwibiramu like abana Uganda nti ebintu bye batategeera.
Like I told you, ideologies eriyo kyebeta jurisprudence ojasoma mateeka. Ideologies donadona jurisprudence. All the different scholars of laws have actually propounded ideologies bayogere ku bintu okusinzira ku societies debaviiramu. Why? When you listen to people like Aristotle or even Hobbes, for example, or even Matthias Gavis, for example, all those philosophers, all of them have the ideologies based on the society jebaviiramu. Ebiseera ebisinga bapasinga n'amateeka okusinziira ku system ediriwo, because those systems are meant to serve them. In fact, one of the biggest, other than the systems, even the media, for example, the reason why these capitalist countries have actually propounded on us so much and actually caused our thinking to believe that everything American or British is good is because of media. Media affects about 90.99% of someone's thinking. Media has got the what called psychological messages that are thrown into the media that actually end up influencing you. Ted Turner, yatandika CNN, was one time asked, what was your greatest regret? He said, my greatest regret is the day I surrendered CNN na jiwayo okujigula to those bigger powers that be, like America Online and stuff like that. Because at that point, those big powers started now proposing ideologies. Media is actually run by philanthropists who are extremely rich, okay? And therefore they throw messages without you knowing. You end up actually doing things with that. And it's so amazing at how ignorant our people are, that even things like Black Friday, for example, you heard about Black Friday, where people come out and say, even, I'm not going to mention particular companies in Uganda, where it's Black Friday, and then we go, where did Black Friday come from? Black Friday came, if you look at the history, from your brothers and sisters, Bevagem as slaves, and they used to bring them in the market, on the streets of America, on a Friday, and they were supposed to be sold as slaves. You know, so abantu baidanga bakolachi babagula. So it's really connotatively even bad. It has bad instigations against us as black people. To still. But we simply welcome everything that comes our way, you know. And then we make these arguments of certain propositions into ebintu ebirungi bibi, homosexuality is good and therefore polygamy is bad. Those arguments. So we have to be very careful in terms of our thinking. That's why I was telling you, we have to discover ourselves. Africans have to discover ourselves. To know to our roots. We need to rediscover ourselves. I actually engage people in terms of what they call a self-realization of what we are meant to be, rather than what we are today.
Now, who has not helped us? Nti bw'obanga olingirira the leaders how they do their things. Ababidi n'abatabidi akola ekintu gwakulembera yalowooza nti olali kikola n'amusinga otegeera. The education system. Nina wano mikwano gyange abali ku LDC. Bali kulirireyo ku LDC. Engeri amateeka, how can I study for 5 years? You give me interview of 4 minutes. Wankobatidde mateeka. N'engeri abantu byakolamu ebintu. But nga byekuusa nti omuntu alikola ekintu because ole takidi ani atayambye muntu omuna Uganda atayidi mateeka n'atayidi bintu nti yasigala nga oba iwe kyolikola kikyamu oba kituufu. He consumes everything.
Nichire kinakoba Samuel, that we need to make a distinction between what they call andriogoge and pedagogy.
Andriogoge and pedagogy.
Andriogoge and pedagogy. Andriogoge means the parrot kind of education, where you simply say A, you repeat A. B, C. That is the problem. Now, on the other hand, pedagogy is the other argument where you actually move what they call the law of the negation, where you move from the thesis to antithesis to a synthesis. You actually move from what they call contextual, context to contextual. You actually add value. In IP terms, intellectual property, but yet adding what they call inventive step to it. So the kind of education we have, as I told you last time, we need to debunk it because of those ideologies. Our ideologies are so premised or grafted on those fake ideologies, forgive me for using the word fake, because they don't belong to us. We never inherited them, they never grew with us, and therefore they cannot be co-opted with us. So my argument is our laws should be given that credence to develop with us. They should be given that ambit to be able to develop in terms of our actions, in terms of activities, in terms of our customs, rather than bending our ideologies on bent ideas. Because buli nation relying on borrowed information or bent information is going to renegade itself into the dustbins.
Okay, edakiika dino ebula isatu okutuuka ku ssaawa 8 dowiro bona ku olwaleero nze Samuel Mwesigwa mukubiriza owa program on the platform every single Monday. Tubaku n'ebintu ebizibu n'awandi ebyokutegeera bye tuwayaako wasobola okuba ate nga otegeera the mysteries of this country. Abantu bafaana bati tudda kugezaako okuba ate nga twogera nabo. Eriyo ebintu ng'akaseera ebiseera ebisinga mulowooza nti ebyo mwabivaaku. Tutuuka n'akaseera twadiscussinga the economy of Uganda. Twakuba GDP eryetu wakuba oti nze ebyo tibitegeera. Twidagezaako okuba ate nga abantu bakuleetera tukumenera ebintu paka ku lulimi lw'otegeera. Weno osobola okuba ate nga otegeera ighanga lyo, otegeere ensi yo. Omukulembeze mu 2026 aleme kwidda kulimba national kya sabuni nga byali kukoba alowooza nti tobiidi ajja kwidda okuwinonola nga buli kimu okidi. I think we shall have a credit. Otavaawo tulikwira. Welcome back in our show to musawa ife ey'okubiri mu kitundu kyaife ekisooka. Ninze Samuel Mwesigwa, mwanduzi wa program on the platform. Olunaku lwa balaza enaku d'omwezi 2 mwezi ogwokutaano mwaka 2022. Olunaku olw'edda olulala olunaku lw'abakozi era abakulembeze ku mitendera egy'endawulo. Eiroboozi lyabeera irala okusaba omukulembeze ow'eggwanga ntiikiriza ote omukono ku iteeka ery'omusaala ogutandikibwaku. Abakozi bonna balina ensonga dhaibwe nningi ino obuli mu kampani de bakoleramu. Nti it is the right omukozi okuba ate nga alina ebiwandiiko ebimukakasa nti mukozi ku mulimo gwona. Professor ntambulire ku amakampani mangi. Ensonga edda abakozi okuba nti emirimu gyaibwe giba legally managed mu mateeka. Tukobe nti bona buvunaanyizibwa bw'abantu abatayidi nti kirinakolebwa. Nti you find nti ensi ekoba nti efugibwa it is by rule eri ku rule of law. Tusuubira nti amateeka gandibeire amateeka agasaanire gandibeire buli wamu. Lwaki amateeka gabaako awatono awandi we gasaanire okuba gaddeema kubaawo oba ebindi ebisaanire okuba mu mateeka byaddeema okuba mu mateeka aye amateeka gaaba awantu awandi. Oba ontegeere bulungi?
Yes, mukulu Samuel. Ndikizaganya niiwe ekyoligezako okuba nti there should be a minimum wage in terms of salary over earnings edandibere nti dabakozi but ekyo kirina okuba commensurate ne socio economic value yaffe ne GDP yaffe as a country nga bw'okinonoire ebiseera ebisinga if the majority are actually earning less than $1 a day you know, then I mean look at the prices Eddie shootings because of the oil saga you know, the oil now amafuta gali about 5,000 something and above whether or not gaida kuika is another question of debate sabuni ali kanana you know, everything has done what shot up. We don't seem to have a, you know, a system here in this country which can actually help us to balance some of these tenets edandiberenga diva munkola etali yabuntu nga buligezako okuva. No wonder that is why it is actually a shame nti if by now is only the only time baligezako okuleeta iteeka nti omuntu alina okufuna esente edagadit. Really in this country as a nation we should have foreseen that long time ago because omuntu atakola absolutely nga tali ku earninga taida kukola ki ku survivinga ebiseera ebisinga obona nti that's the reason why people actually go and do those clandestine things okuyiba okumena banebe because ultimately ende erikola ki erikubanda that's the problem mu byawandiikibwa eri ekikoba nti he who shall not work shall not what shall not eat but we should understand that by the way perhaps that time has actually been overtaken because the beginning of that time happened in what they called when the capitalist was actually beginning. And there was a time when actually there was more work, you know, than the people. So at that point there were actually people telling people muje mukole kubanga emirimo giriyo n'okusasala kulichi kuriyo. But now we are living in a time.
So we no longer have this statement that he who doesn't work shall not eat.
A statement jive kuchobona nti there's what they call welfare in those modern countries. Think
what can we say now?
Think about those countries in welfare. Right now, Abazungu, they're actually supposed to be given portions or rations. They give you coupons to survive. They give you certain allowances to survive because their government has made provision because they have realized in spite of the fact that now for us we are still struggling with actually maintaining a minimum wage in terms of who and what should get what in terms of survival. I think we just need a revamp of that of our country and everything. Someone told me, how do we change corruption in this country? Yakati, the only way we can do is actually kugema na babali kuyonga amabere because it appears every time they actually begin to suckle that's when those aspects of corruption begin to go into their bodies because it becomes something that is almost undeniable.
What is the relationship between the rule of law and that social feeling and decision by that social feeling meaning enti twetaaga iteeka metutegeere nti omukozi yeetaaga esente diti?
Good question.
Nti oba tusobola kulinga ne tukoba nti embeera eri eti Uganda buli kintu ekinaashuukanga nga twetaaga the good part of it iteeka ne lina okusookanga libite memale?
Good question. Kyobona nti activists baife and sometimes nga wenkobeere bano abandi bairenga ba representative baife nga abantu abandi baire ba advocacy baffe they would have actually been able to okuba nti batu presenting amo ideologies nedo nga tukalina kutuukayo they should be able to propose those ideas. Those who meet, for example, His Excellency by no kuba kuni propositions, you may have sympathy for him because he's an individual who sometimes is overwhelmed by all different ideas. Alina bebeta ba advisors, not so. So some of those advisors should actually be able to go mu bantu bafuna ideologies bategeera laki ekirumachi omuntu. But unfortunately many of them simply go because they actually want to get a few shoes or a few trips to Dubai and stuff like that, and when that is done for them they call it good day, but fundamentally omuntu wa bulido yeyongera kolaki kubonaabona eiteeka nga bwokobe tirina kuba forced olw'okuba nti waliwo ekinigibwa. You should be able as a country, as a nation, as a people to project. Right now in America, recently I think it was Donald Trump who was actually signing a treaty of actually sending an army to the moon. Think about that. The thing of sending an army to the moon. For you are just even thinking of just making a taker to make sure you have a minimum wage. Can you imagine? Think about that. So that's the kind of ideology I'm thinking about. Until we turn our thinking upside down and understand until we had the owners of this nation and we owe a duty of care to those who are unborn before us, and that we have to extend this duty unselfishly to them, okuba yambokuba that we live beyond us as individuals, that our legacy goes on. The mere fact that tizaire aye somewhere azaire omwana wa Samairo tirina kumukotogira, that's the African culture jetwaling up. a child in the village belonged to everyone. Not so. Eranga bokola graduation nga Samuel graduate nze taita baba we yenka. Aita abe chalo bona. Kubanga Samuel we yatambulanga nabitanga waka yafunanga omuyembe gwa neighbor yakola ya janago. Yafunanga ipera lya neighbor yakola you know the baso gabako bangati jamera jane. That ideology of jamera jane. So I think we need to go back to the roots and understand morality has to come into us. I think it was St. Augustine. There's a time when if a law is unjust, then you have the right to oppose it. St. Augustine was a Christian, remember. But he said if a law is unjust, then chikukakata okujiwakana to oppose it.
The system of okuba proud, can we still be proud into Uganda? We on rule of law. Etuyambi but etuyambi.
Let me argue that in this perspective. The question is, do we even have a rule of law? I'm sorry to say that I'm not a politician, but as a philosopher, as a thinker, I will argue and say, do we really have a rule of law? Look, when Justice Sekoko made a statement in one of his articles, actually at Law Enforcement Center, he said, with all due respect, what do you call rule of law when someone can call you in the middle of the night and say, make this decision this way? You know?
And you don't revert it.
And you get those points. How about instances when we actually call a few people and give them certain amounts of money to, make certain individuals go through others' fate, or perhaps extend certain whatevers? I don't want to be political because I'm not a politician.
But of course you are an element in the composition of understanding the law.
Absolutely.
You can explain to us. For us, sometimes when we speak, others feel like we are opposing the state of the law and the peace that we have in Uganda. So you are the people to explain to us, do we still have the rule of law in Uganda? And if we don't have it, do we still need it to come back?
And as I said, every individual who is not comfortable with opposition or critic becomes obviously what? A dictator, for lack of a better word. Yes, absolutely. Because then, because you simply want to be the alpha and the what? And omega. You follow the principle of what? Of dogma. As it is, so shall it be, forever and what? And ever. Even God in all his, majesty, is not actually a dictator. Do you know one time that is? Do you know actually what
God is not a dictator.
He actually believes in ideology of freedom. By the way, you know at one time actually the Council of Heaven sat. You remember? And when they were debating matters there, Satan came and entered. You remember? What did he ask Satan? He told Satan, "Hey, where have you been?" Meaning, maybe we expected him to be part of the what? Imagine. Then Satan said, you man, I've been moving around up and down. Then he said, by the way, like a friend, did you see my servant Job? Do you see how they were bragging? They were pulling one another's legs, calling it a joke. Did you see my body, Job? Then Satan replied, he said, what would he do if you hadn't given him all that protection and stuff like that? Now what you do? Go and remove whatever he has, but don't take his what?
Meaning
they were even betting on a man's life. Satan and who?
And God.
So this ideology, we have to understand opposition. Opposition is everywhere, and it is good and it is healthy. It only helps you to improve you. So any society that thinks that being offensive to you, I told you last time, there's what they call offensive writing and defensive writing. Constructive criticism and destructive criticism. So we need to appreciate and comprehend this. Criticism is good, it makes you stronger. Weri omusaada yali muzaani wa bigo ebiseera ebisinga bwe bamubanga ekigo ne bamusinga yasitukanga yakad, now I'm revolving myself to fight myself like 7 times more. He encouraged himself. Some of the biggest, Roosevelt yagwa mirundi emeka, he attempted to become president over 7 times, and he never became. The only time he became was actually when he's in a wheelchair. So there are people who actually given themselves in terms of persistence and resilience and tenacity okuba nti bakonkaringa ekintu ekyo. Without it, Churchill was celebrated, Winston Churchill was celebrated as a hero, as a British hero for a long time because of the world wars they yalwananga. Let me tell you this story. One time Churchill yavuga, they had what they call these woobers oditegera, like the ones we have. So yati amamotoka ngali kuja BBC kuwa speech, bwatuuka ku BBC drive eyamutwala yatolayo $1 pounds, about 5 pounds yamuwa ati muna we balikola kundeeta akati ayi ngoli papa nti muna ndi kupapa kubanga nino kwira ewaka Winston Churchill ajja kwogera kuki ku radio oli uli akantu ako ayi nga ono tayidi nti ole nani ni Wilson Churchill kyamugema ku eno yasaneka kati omusada ayina kulumuka kuirayo
ampulirize
yakati mufo kya 5 kankuwa 10 yatwala 10 yakola yakimuwa omusada yakati muna kansigale wano yakati lwaki tojja n'owuliza Wilson Churchill akati moche ekisirisiro ekijja okwogera nga oli kumpa $10 kinga saaki nze kansigale wano iwe ono mugaso kyendi nga tayidi Wilson Churchill yawamu amaani so fundamentally what am I trying to say nti morals daife ne attitude daife they're totally engineered the wrong way you know.
So kyoyoka tununula nti whenever there is something the people in leadership baduliza ekintu people timwidinga Uganda tukali ku rule of law and somebody is proud that Uganda we on rule of law nga bwe bategeeza nti ebyo byonna byemubona tibisalibwawo n'abantu tuleka amateeka gasalawo. Is it the reality?
Ekibuuzo ekyo oli kimbuuza ndigezaako kidojinga
of course ndiki kubuuza ng'omu n'amateeka on your observation
but nga wenkobye rule of law has tenets deyina okufollowinga nga wenkobye mulina okuba mu principle of legality you cannot apprehend someone okumuwa arrestinga nga wazira iteeka likola limena but how many times do you see people being bound up ngezira kikye bamenye because of hearsay. Number 2 tulina okuba for example separation of powers nga bwokobye you know the 3 arms of powers. Is it true nti diriyo don't we see one arm stronger than the other? When you see certain what do you call them, caucuses sitting and then they are saying so and so is going to become the next speaker even before that freedom is actually exercised by the parliament. Are we talking about parliamentary supremacy or perhaps executive in the judicial independence when the people who are actually in those offices may have been with all due respect cadres of a certain organization, so all those are questions you ask yourself. How about incarcerating people beyond the 48 hours rule? How about finding people in terms of their rights, freedom of rights, who are thrown through the windows? How about the freedom of journalists, for example? You saw what happened during those little sagas on the streets where bakubanga masasi nibakubanga ba journalists nibakubanga emigo. So tell me about freedom, tell me about rule of law. You will tell me that maybe there is no country in the world that may have that permanent standard of rule of law, but at least try to show us that we have a semblance or we respect these institutions. But when you get some people apprehended, the moment the court releases them, then again you do what? Wabarestinga. And then sometimes you end up surrounding the courts, by putting armies around them. All those aspects. So tell me about freedom law. Tell me about democracy.
Do we need the presence of freedom or we need the reality of the rule of law?
Like I said, we need both. We need the presence of freedom, we need the reality. The question is, do we have the will?
To do what?
To execute those.
I don't know.
Do we have the will? If we don't have the will, where there is no will, there is no what? There is no way.
Maybe somebody can have the will, but the nature of the people may force that somebody to go off what is meant to be done, because you can't underrate it.
You see, a certain wise gentleman said that one of the biggest challenges of Africans is when they stay in power. Not so. That every time they stay in power, they cause what? Problems for themselves. A certain wise gentleman. Now, the question we have today is whether or not these words are not going back to haunt that particular individual in terms of those allusions. So the point I'm trying to underscore is that let us live the game. Be the game. Set the standard. When you set the standard, like we have models and ideals like Nelson Mandela's and other people who actually set the standard. We have a neighboring country which has set a standard, Tanzania, in terms of Kenya, in terms of successive transitions or in terms of propagations of certain laws. They may not be perfect, but set an example so that those who come after you will have something to learn from you in terms of an example, a plausible example. I am also aware that maybe we may not have the right people in terms of candidacy. But I'll also remind you, still following scriptures, remember the other gentleman, Elijah, against Jezebel. Yekweka, Katonda Mkati, by the way, I think it was Elijah was saying, oh men, they have killed everyone. By the way, I can assure you, Samuel, you could be the next president of this country. And some of these things you should have harness them and learn from them. And I believe that each one of you should dream a dream that my son could be the next president of this country, that my daughter could be the next president of this country. If we don't have that in our hearts, then we are not having rule of law, and we don't have constitutionalism.
If people cannot dream, if people cannot have the ability to dream,
absolutely, to dream in terms of possessing that ideology or even occupying that office, if that office is going to be restricted to a particular individual, this ideology of continuity, then consider yourself, this is not a monarchy, it is a democracy, like you say. If it is a monarchy, and you all know what happened to monarchies. You remember France was a monarchy system, but remember what happened? People had to revolt. Actually, Britain was also about to revolt against them until the British Queen and the kings actually struck a deal and said, you know what, let's create that parliamentary whatever, where the MP, Prime Minister, will become the head of the institutions of sorts, where we have what they call Westminster's mode of government as opposed to a monarchical system. But what causes those monarchies to disentangle is because people, in terms of ideologies, in terms of belief, sometimes get nagged and they live in what they call diminishing returns if they stay into those systems for a long time. This ideology of believing that only one person, the Basoga have a saying, so this ideology of saying that this proposition is actually belonging to a particular whatever, credence, is something that we have to undo. So that Samuel should be able to dream a dream when I will be the next candidate in terms of this, without fear or what, or favor. Dr. King Yakoba, the time is going to come when people are not going to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of what? Character. He said, I want that day. I have a dream. Remember that dream speech? He said, I have a dream that every child, the time will come when we are not going to be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our characters. For me, that's the kind of country that I believe in. I believe in a country where you, my brother Samuel, can be the next Chief Justice of this country, as long as you work and pursue it, and you fathom whatever is required in terms of excelling. You burn the midnight oil, like they say.
That is very good, and if you can have the ability to dream a dream that you can be a president, you can be a Chief Justice, you can be a Speaker of Parliament tomorrow, it means Uganda will have the rule of law. But if you can't have the ability even to dream, ngati mulotanga kuku kino kanchize mulusoka bobanga bana timulotanga kuku nti niwe president wa Uganda is the rule of law. Inna kolwaido lunaku lw'abaana mawulire, eidembe ly'abaana mawulire n'ensonga by'ebyokwerinda. We are the fourth arm. Obuzibu bulinza kuvaawa. Abannamawulire n'abalemererwa okutafuta amateeka oba ebitongole ebyokwerinda and other institutions nedongera obutategeera abannamawulire.
First of all, ndoza abannamawulire abajja celebrating freedom, press freedom in terms of tomorrow's day. And I will argue and say that Ngabo Okobye, you rightly put it, Okobye, the fourth arm. I agree with you entirely. Kubanga amazima gali nti press, media can build someone or destroy someone. Era abazungu bagikozesa ino. Everyone who actually wants to become, for example, a Republican ruler must be very good with Fox News. Anyone who wants to be a Democrat has to be very good with CNN. They've already taken their sides in terms of ideologies. You know, in fact, that's what Putin was complaining one time, and even France said, I think we need to have that kind of press ideology to sort of tualamu mawanga aga, like Africa and like, so that our ideologies are done what? Are exposed. Even the war, by the way, the genocide war that started in Rwanda, they will tell you that it was the press that caused that war, that genocide war, because of the ideologies that were being propounded on that those radios. Every time they're talking about a certain tribe, those are cockroaches, those are whatever. So ideology, if you're not careful with the press and journalists, that is a very dangerous arm. It can make you or unmake you. And yet we need to protect them because they serve a very big duty to this country. They serve a very big duty to this world. The press is the only way in which information is disseminated. ne dobozi. If there is a dobozi lya Katonda, it is the press. Because through that information that goes through the press, people are educated, people are made aware, people are, are actually enlightened in terms of their rights, in terms of their civic responsibilities, in terms of what they ought to do. So I believe that fundamentally their rights should be untouched. Owama, they should be given the right to say, even if what he's saying is chichikusanusa.
I have a question there. Legally mumateka, mumawe yetu ina what we call the bitter truth. It is the reality, but it will cause harm if it is said. I don't know whether you can understand.
Yes.
And omunama we are the right to speak. And if that is spoken, another one will say that causes harm. Era legal omenya amateeka. How can the truth and what is meant to be said,
you see, and this is the problem
be brought out?
This is the problem we have. Every time you fear that let me nzibikire Samuel kyajo okwogera kubanga ndi kutya nti Samuel bw'akoba kida kuleta kacyankalano, then maybe you're not doing something right. You get my point? Because bw'obanga ndikola kirungi Samuel naida n'akinkoba ng'ayo abantu bali kubona kirungi, they won't believe what Samuel is saying. They will actually challenge Samuel nti by the way oli kulimba oli tukoba oti ati tuwazimba toyi dakawo kabulungi aye diriyo oli kulimba oti wazira maadi ku kyalaye gakola ki galiyo. So why are you afraid of what Samuel is saying? Okula kungiriyo kyolikola ki kyotali kwenda Samuel ayogere ekyamazima. Wilson Churchill at one time was asked the same question by the press. Yakat, okay, we understand those scenarios. Yakat, in times of war, the truth becomes so precious that it has to be guarded with the bodyguard of lies. So, fundamentally, even the scriptures, by the way, say there are certain things that are left to God and God alone. Ni Katonda yenatiyemala in terms of what he has written in terms of his authority, as it were. So the point I'm trying to say is that I believe if 311 or 101% that the rights of the press should actually not be infringed on at any one time. They should be given the liberty to speak as long as what they are speaking has been authoritatively researched on, because eri okwogera bwogere kubanga ndi kwenda kuona nalina lyaki lya muntu, what they call libel or slander. But as long as what you're speaking is truth, I think you owe us a duty, you as journalists, to speak and tell us reality. How many things, for example, during the time of COVID, if you remember, there was a time when we were throwing certain people off. I was personally thrown off a certain WhatsApp group or okubanga nali ndikuogera COVID and certain things. Why? Because we had stigmatized ourselves. We never believed anything in terms of Africanism. Because we believed that Professor Gwanga ali kulimba bulimbi. But it turned out that even now COVID, as I told you, is being exported in the rest of the world and it's doing miracles. So the argument is, you cannot fight the truth by muzzling the truth. No. By the way, listen to this. There's a wise man who said one time that the truth takes so many hours. The lie moves almost half across the world. But the truth takes time to put on his shoes. But the truth reaches there many days before the lie. So the truth will always triumph.
Kale, kampumulemu katono. Wenaba ngani zetu dakubatenga tuumba. Wisunu seife ekisembayo. Obulimba butambula bwatuuka. Obulimba butambula mangu bwatuuka buli wamu. Ayi amazima gayinza okulwawo okutandika otambula. Ayi we gatambula ye gatuuka gamala galwayo ino gatuukayo mangu ng'olaka alituuka. Misunu kyaffe ekisembayo ndakuba ate nga nkuwa akaaganya producer wange dakuterawo namba yange awo tusobola okuba ate nga tuteesa enkulankulana ey'eiwanga ni okubaawo okw'amateeka. Okubaawo okw'amateeka agali so rigid nti Uganda tulina okugoberera amateeka nfuga y'amateeka etuyambye ekimu nkulankulana oba ekosiisa etyenkulankulana era kyekisaana okuba ate nga kikolewa. Ninze Sam Omwesigwa otavaawo tulikwira. Welcome back in our show. This is our last part in the program, The Platform. Ninze Sam Omwesigwa. Mikwano gyange abali mu bitundu ebyamulagaawo Kibaawo zone mwebale okuba ate nga muli program eno n'abali ku kitebe ekikulu Kibugaawo eky'Eidinda mwebale okuba ate nga mutubona n'abali tubonera ku mitimbagano gyaife ojja ku YouTube ku Baba TV Uganda oba ku website yefu www.babatv.co.ug to streaming live 24 hours. Dasobola okubatinga tubona studios muno nina mu Professor Christopher Lubogo tuli kulingirira ku nnamula y'amateeka mu ighanga lino erya Uganda. Kusoma amateeka n'oba nga we were practicing lawyer tinisho nk'okuba ate ng'olina ogategeera. I think every Ugandan alina okubaako ne concept entono ina at least ey'amateeka. Oleme okuba a victim of crime nti oyagana na muntu nga eriyo services zetusasulira ate ate nga abantu bayibibwa. Kanso omuna Uganda nzirako aganya kajja kawaabira gavumenti eno nti eyo ba investor abedda bakola muno business aye nga business edda ogisasulira aye ate nga tofuna kyosaaniira efuna. Omuntu bajja mu maduuka eyo bagula n'ebintu oli bamukuba nti kuguziza ekiro namba eya sukaali aye ng'oba ne minzaani yo waka n'opima mu sukaali oyo tawera kiro. Omuntu yajja akuba nti nguza ekiro 5 edda enyama aye nga bw'atuuka waka in other words bamuweire kiro 3 nga that one comes like those are consumer rights. Enumano police yatuuse yabisa amateeka yakuba nti abaleekaanya ebidongo timuyira okuleekaanya but you find nti muba mu katundu omuntu yaleekaanya agadongo abantu badema kutenduka and somebody will say oyo mugayiga abe n'ebidongo bye all that. Kirenenze tumalize nakyo presence y'amateeka okuba nti Uganda tufugira ku lovyo eriwo oba ezirawo ebeda wena kenerabire wali. If the rule of law is not there, do we still need it? Webanga yavaawo because of circumstances and because of individuals' decision, do we still need it?
Every singer, if you lose hope, the Chinese say that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with 2 small steps. But a person who dies when attempting to walk is of much value than a person who never started at all. So, chendigeza kukobanti ebisere bisinga nti in spite of the challenges we may have, ighanga, we should never lose hope. Hope is on the way. There is light at the end of the tunnel. That is how we keep believing in ourselves and believing in that tomorrow there will be a better tomorrow. Every time you stop believing in terms of tomorrow or in terms of the future, that's when people begin giving up and settling for complacency. I don't mind who comes after me. And that is the biggest challenge that we have as a country and even as individuals. How I wish I'm holding a book here, perhaps Joydi. This book is a 100-year-old book. The History of Busoga by Y.K. Rubogo, ESQ, Commander of the British Empire. Let me tell you something interesting about this book. Why do you think I'm holding it? The person who gave me the manuscript of this book was a relative of mine. Nali India onjire muchalira in its old pamphlet form, bide pamphlet ebikaire. Na mukanti muna na uli ako ati dada yawandika ku kisabo kya History of Busoga. Ati by the way ninacho wano aye njachocha. Are you hearing that?
Why?
Njakola ki?
Njachocha.
So I said, wait a minute. Why are you going to burn it? Nti mulimu a lot of information egemagana n'ebintu ebyobuwangwa. And if people get to know these things, then baida kwirayo mu ngeri dawe dachi ede obuwangwa edigemagana n'ebintu bino. For him he had this allusion kubanga yali mu kwedini. So his argument of
calling the tradition satanic.
We balino nabitanga niwe ngomusoga bwakoba.
Zena ndabawo.
So what I did nankati bempera anonze soko chimpe ngoka alikola ki? Kuchocha nje nkola ki? Mbisemu old pamphlet. It was listed nga when nakoba as an endangered book. Nga wochi googling it's endangered. There was only one manuscript in Makerere University library. One in its old sense. So when achifuna naba nacho for about 15 years nga chiri manuscript enkaire nga tichichusanga. Until it dawned on me, I can't, by the way, why don't I resurrect this book? No, which it is. It wasn't in this form.
So this is the book they were going to burn.
This was the book they were going to burn. because it has incredible history egemagana n'ebyafaayo ebya Busoga. Interestingly, for example, there is even a very good story between the Nadiope and the Zibondo. There's a war that happened between the Nadiope and Zibondo. Mperano, the Wagabulas, they were actually pursuing the Balamojis, but they were about to take over their territory. Waba yomula moji mulaleko ekamuchi muchisiko. I want you to listen to this interestingly. Boyekweka muchisiko. They're really destroying the Balamojis. Olwokuba nti yali agwire mu kisiko yakola target. So when the Nadiope was coming, the king of the Bugabulas, ono yagema ifumu yakola ki yamufumita. Olutalo lwakola lutya lwakoma, because every time in war enter a day nga boyitanga kabaka ngolutalo lukola lutya lukomi bahirayo. Ono omulamuji alumuka ewazibonde akati muna omusadda nkoze ki mumaze. Do you know what the Zibondo did? Zibondo akati, who are you? Okuleta amawulire amabi otinago oyita otya omuntu oleo toyini nti kabaka.
Hope not knowing into olabe yayoza mbona idasanuka
webale. He actually executed the man just like in the biblical ways. Do you remember the biblical things that happened? Do you remember the time when King David where ali pursuing mutabani we his son who had rebelled against him, when his son had actually run and caused the war, then the very first guy who came back and reported it, by the way, mutabani wa afire muise, King David killed him. Just like the very first one who went to King David and reported it, by the way, Saul afire, King David killed him. It creates a lot of, I mean, there are so many interesting stories. I'll tell you another story, for example, of what happened, one of the chiefs of Luba, Weaja kabaka wa Uganda yasendinganga amaje to help those principalities, because Busoga had principalities, different chiefdoms, to fight like nga bojaye, for example, iwe ngoli kwenda kuwangulole ojewa kabaka ati muna ido nambe kubayandi bubi yakuwa amaje, then you give him tributes, gaida ga alwana ga kurestoring ngashi nga the king or the prince of that area. So one of the kings yazano muzano muganda we, because you were debating who becomes who, yategera nti kabaka ono yayendanga ino mutere omwidi. So what he did after they had won the war, yategera nti this friend of mine ajja kusindika tributary gifts ewani ewa kabaka, yaja ya gema mutere nkolesa ekigambo ekyo Busoga oba nekosa kya Lusoga, it might not sound well. Kankwese ekyoluzungu, because oluzungu has a way of making things better. Ya defecatinga mumutere, ya mupakinga bulungi, ya muwerezani ole kabaka bidire mbirabo bidire mbirabo kabaka yakati, how can this happen? I ngona alikwenda provoking akai war against what? So this book has so many interesting stories. Abantu abasinga byebataidi, but it is
which we shall also look at, because
so
there is a lot here.
So absolutely. So ombuziza wankoboti rule of leno etukolera
weba yavaawo tukajeetaaga kikumi na ndala. We need rule of law. Ngabwe nkobere, any nation that fails to dream, the litmus test is this for rule of law nze kyenkobere. Litmus test neno. If Samuel you stop dreaming nti my son can become the next president of this country, following the right procedures, to me that is my standard and there is no rule. But if someone can believe that Zena I can become without fighting, going to the bush, without unnecessary mudslinging, but by credence of character, integrity, rationality, distinguishing yourself, honor, then we have rule of law. That is my litmus test. If you look at the trend of issues and how Uganda is, how long will it take us and how possible will it be for it to be restored?
Not long. I'll tell you that song that the black Americans Mbanga during the civil rights movement. In fact, Dr. King bamubuzako ekibuzo nga kyobuze ekibuze. Yairamu yakabati, not so long.
We believe when they used to hold themselves in the hands when the police was tear gassing them. You know, by the way, in that book that I told you of demystifying the order from above, tear gas. Do you know that tear gas is actually listed as a chemical, as a weapon banned to be used in war? Tear gas. And yet we use it here in most African countries and most other cases to actually disperse of what?
Crowds.
Think about that. But in war, it's actually not even allowed. Think about that. So there's a lot we have to learn in terms of that. So my argument is that we should be prepared in terms of sacrifices. Dr. King said sometimes it may take blood sacrifice because of resilience and tenacity. Sometimes it may take being fired even from jobs. Sometimes it may take, you know, being abused or insulted, called rebel rousers or agitators. But as long as you believe, that song they used to walk as holding their hands, we shall overcome. We shall overcome. So me, I have not lost faith in this country. I have faith in this country, that this country has the potential to discover itself, to rediscover itself. You know?
Because why do I speak that way? It is the observation I make on a single man's site. You may prove it right or wrong. Why do I see that the restoration of the rule of law in Uganda, it has a decade to come? It is the despondency of many Ugandans, that men cannot be subjective. They cannot speak their mind because they are desperate and they are poor. And some of those, the handful of people who are eating and enjoying in the absence of the rule of law, tend to be the providers and the source of hope for the others. Tiddo omusoga kitegeere nti abantu okuba nti bazira ngera tibeesobola nga baavu atuuka akaseera nga takayogera mazima takabanda kituufu kubanga olaasanukira kiro okuba nga kizirawo n'amuliisa.
Absolutely. Nikyenkobye complacency, sometimes okukuta mu corner waikiriza embeera ekola ki eriwo. But as I told you, nti one of the America, for example, is a country that is born out of rebellion after King George because of the sufferings the King George were doing in England. You know, they rebelled and then they went to America, and actually England pursued them for a long time. Do you know why the White House is called White House?
No.
It is called White House because the British burnt it about 3 times. And every time they burnt it, these guys, because they had nothing to do, they would simply paint it what? White or Romo Kagul. So that's why it's called White House. So the argument we are proponing here is that you must have faith in yourself.
So it had a lot of scars and blacks. And
so every time they call it. So the argument is that we should have faith in ourselves. We should believe that there is a tomorrow. We should believe that there is a brighter tomorrow. And let me tell you the truth, there is a brighter tomorrow, regardless of what happens.
You speak because you believe in God, and every Sunday you go and they tell you that Jesus is coming soon. So you put that soon on everything.
By the way, that my argument is that even if Almighty God came and told me that, you know, there are certain things you have to believe and argue with God. Even the scriptures say, by the way, come and let's reason together. That's what the scriptures say. God is saying, by the way, come and let us reason what? Together. So there are instances when you actually argue with God and say, there are men who argued with God. Joseph fought with God. Do you remember that? Joseph fought with God.
Something which is strange.
Until he actually broke his what? His hip. But God later gave him the what? The blessing. So there are sometimes we have to insist on our rights, regardless.
Okay. Oidabita mpereza obubaka ku namba eriawo. Togikubaku just weereza obubaka ku WhatsApp. Ensonga eno iwogirowoozaako otya? It is a bit philosophical and for people to understand it. But at least I think you're understanding it. The rule of law in Uganda, if it is not in now, do we need it to be restored? And if you see that we don't have the rule of law, are you really seeing the right thing? What do we call the rule of law? Enfuga y'amateeka mu ighanga erya Uganda eyambye Uganda okulankulana oba teyambye? Enfuga y'amateeka tugifuna muki mu Uganda? Ye amateeka abantu bagakolesa bagagemesa bulungi nti omunansi ali eyo otuuka otunda ettaka lyo aidi okugula ettaka yedda n'abasirikale yakusasula esente bamala baira bakunaga ku esente wabula yonaawaaba nti abantu mulina emisango mu kooti aye mutuuka mwakuba nti omugaiga tasinga musango. That statement yatuuka n'okulowoozesa abandi oba kyona kiri mu constitution nti era olakuba ati omugaiga oli yakuba mwine iwe twedinga omugaiga tasinga musango andi that ideology yatambulanga era bakuba nti omugaiga tasinga musango. Ebyokutuuka okubivaaku wabiviira ku birala nga mwatuuka mwakuba nti ffe tetusobola ensonga eyo yatandiikali era tusobola tutya okuba ate nga tugitoolawo. Thanks for the show, Sam. Regards to Professor Lubogo. He was my university professor. Very brilliant gentleman who loves what he does. Ononi Joero Naluwairo. Webalo okuba ate nga tuweereza bubaka. Onakobe hello, thanks for the show. Ono yakuba hello live. Webalo okuba ate nga mali kutubona. Ndija afunayo just message edindi ntono ino. Nja kusaba wabali wereza obaka ku namba eyo otaweereza audio weereza text wanditaka bubaka bwa text ndasobola okuba ate nga mbusoma tusobola okuba ate nga tutegeeragana bukalamu ino. Professor nenda tumalize n'ensonga eno ndala ino. Bwe tuba tulonda abakulembeze batuteekeze tubalonda nga tuidi nti n'abaidi n'abatusinga ku ino. Concept eda nti abakulembeze ife ababalonda nife bakama baibwe. Aya ate kayima bafuuka bakama baife nga n'abateesa bye benda. Tibatyama nife ne tubakobera bye twenda. As that helped Uganda.
Nekyo kyenkobye separating the demagogue from the truly inspired. Nti mulimu abantu abende ebintu olwekweganula and when they get into those offices bakati aha kati onsoniro mpera ano kankole nga bwenkola nti bwenenda and nga bwenkobye public service is a duty where your stockholders abantu bofuga oba botwala are your bosses whether you like it or not. You remember last time twagera ku kigambo solus populi solus vei, the welfare of the people is the what is the welfare is the voice of God. The welfare of the people becomes the voice of God ultimately. It's the intention of God. So ebiseera ebisinga okwendeza okweganula iwe ng'omuntu n'ebiseera ebivaako obuzibu bwe tuba nabo ng'eggwanga and tulina olutalo lunene ino nga bwenkobeire bwe tulina okuzimba in terms of building a legacy eyaife ng'eggwanga nti titweyendeza nga ife aye tweyendeze for purpose of tomorrow.
Kale kamalirize ne bano tusobola okuba ati nga tuwumbawumba. Nakobye nti greetings from Ibrahim Sunday, IU Kampala, next Guild President. Thanks to Council for the discussion. It has been good. But in Uganda, rule of law is no more. We have rule by law. Thanks. Okay. Good evening, sir. This is my first time to be on Baba TV. Councillor Muwanika Muhammedi Esitanti. Nambe kumpewo kota jikuba kuwerezo baka ku WhatsApp. Ndasobola okuba ate nga mbufuna. Nze Kayemba Franco mbeera mukono nebaza professor olw'okumanya ensonga. Webale. Thanks for the show. But a country where there is no rule of law, there is no development in every sector. Even spiritually, we have rule of law. Mbunimu mwoyo. Eriyo enfuga ey'amateeka. Kale. Mwebala okuba ate nga muli tubona iwe iyo maze okuba ate nga ngisoma abasinga muweereza audio tusobola kuba ate nga nzaana maloboozi. Audio kyentegeeza nti tuwe recordinga kuweereza obubaka nga obuwandiise ndasobola okuba nga mbusoma. Professor tusiibule tuliira wano olundi otulina ono demystifying the order from above. Wategeeza ki era kirijja tuyamba ki. Kale kamalirize nono katono. I'm Sabit Elik from Nansana. Thanks for always bringing that professor. Is such a knowledgeable human being. Okay, we are all human beings. So, nensonga neyo. Sibule.
Marcus Gavis Yakoba, you know, that the world has made being black a curse. I intend to make it a virtue. I will argue it this way. The world has made being black a curse in terms of intellectual, in terms of our ideologies. I told you in America, for about 100 years, a black person was considered to be 3/4 of a human being. The Constitution equate until 3/4 of what? A human beings. You are a little bit less than an ape, but more like an ape. In fact, in other countries, like in Europe, they used to get young kids, black kids, babatanga mu zoo, so people could come and pay man and see them. Your brothers and sisters. That's the humiliation we went through it. And that's my argument in terms of Ubuntu Bulam. So every time I come to this show, my argument as a philosopher, as a legal scholar, is to try and appeal to free your intellectual mind, so that your intellectual mind can be free. Sometimes the things that we may say, as I said, binzokubanga be offensive, but again, as I said, take them in good faith. Because every time when you deny yourself to be learning, like I told you what Alvin Joffa said, the illiterate of the 21st century is one who is not able to learn, relearn, and unlearn. So you have to have that ability. To, by the way, Professor Kanyamba said, the higher I go, the more I realize I actually do not know. So information is power.
Yeah.
So what you're doing in terms of disseminating this information to me is power.
Okay.
I want to thank you and also the people of Busoga, whom I call fine pencils in God's hands.
They are fine pencils.
In God's hand. There is no incredible people like the people of Busoga. I will tell you that when we begin arguing the history of Busoga. Beginning from beauty, how the by the way, many of the Baganda women, actually the mothers of the people of the Baganda came from Busoga, because they used to come and get the beautiful girls from Busoga and take them to where? To Uganda. So incredibly, many of the Baganda today have a lot of Busoga blood in them.
I just remember one thing. If you don't love criticism, then you're a dictator. I don't understand Busoga, but I've been impressed with the TV show about the rule of law. All I believe concerning the law is that democracy is the only same option for governing the society, and deviation from it is rather than a misfortune and a setback. I pray one day we experience the rule of law to the fullest in the country. This is Aldo from Kansanga. Lastly, thanks for the program. My first time to be on Baba TV. Please invite that professor again. He has a lot for us to learn. I'm Augustine. Nenda bebaza bakagwa okuva gye tutandikire paka n'essaawa eno. I count it a success for you to be part of this show. It is a bit philosophical for us to explain this to you, but you believe that slowly by slowly you will understand, and after a couple of months and a couple of years and a couple of days, you'll become fine pencils to even teach others. My prayer is one, that in the next election, nimwo omulijja okubanga mukoba abakulembeze ekyokola, abakulembeze tina abalijjwa okubasaba akalulu nga babagula bugule. Let us do our part. This is nation building. Ninze Sam Omwesigwa, Ssaabasabaazinga wa Busoga, Wilberforce Kadombula Gavana Diope owokunala tafumvu ebyanda n'ebyanda.